Hello everyone. So today we're going to go back to the SE function in INTJ life and in INFJ life. We're going to go back to the SE function because of course that function is in many ways one of our nemeses, and yet behind the shadow of the nemesis it's our best ally. But we need to learn, we need to know how to channel it for the purposes of our personality, of our largeness of life, of our individuation. Now, there's a confusion in the community, something that I'm observing a lot, which I think that really contributes to a reduction in understanding, maybe a prevention of understanding. And precisely for this reason, do I believe it's important to cast light on this confusion and resolve it. When we talk about the SE grip, now that's a useful phrase. It's a useful phrase because INFJs and INTJs can be in the grip of SE. It's funny because in my imaginary world, which as you can imagine is rich, my best picture of being in the grip of SE is from a series called The Queen's Gambit, where Beth, I think is the name of the main character, goes through this kind of indulgent rampage where she's drinking a lot and doing all sorts of things. SE grip captures something and it is kind of vivid, so we should keep this phrase. However, there's two forms of SE taking over in such a way that it causes significant anxiety and loss of well-being for an INFJ or an INTJ like Beth in the Queen's Gambit. Sometimes they can interact, as we're going to see in a minute, but they're not the same thing. And it's important to tell them apart because sometimes people have a certain level of reticence toward using SE out of fear of falling into the grip, which is not justified. And usually when you decide that you're going to engage SE more, that's a good thing and does not threaten to lock you inside a grip state. So in a sense, you might be sort of stopping yourself from doing a good thing based on a fear that actually has no real grounds. But that's because the pull of the confusion is strong. So here's the confusion. A lot of people seem to think that SE grip states happen as a result of being too immersed in an SE world, having to being in a context where you don't have a choice, but you need to be in extroverted mode all the time and use precisely SE all the time. And that's going to lead you to a grip state where you're going to be locked in this state and it's going to be hard to get out of it. And you can find yourself sort of feeling miserable and imprisoned for weeks and weeks. Because one of the important features of the grip state is that it's not a momentary state. This is what you need to understand as well, right? It's not something that lasts for 20 minutes and then you're out of it. It's not something that lasts for a couple of hours and that you're out of it. It's usually going to last for at least a few days, sometimes a few weeks, and sometimes it can last much longer as well in the more pathological cases. That's what actually is a little bit scary, for people about the grip state, is the fact that it extends in time and it's not always clear how to put an end to it. Now, what I want to tell you is the grip state, the SE grip state, because obviously other types have other forms of grip state. The SE grip state of INFJs and INTJs arises from something internal. It does not arise from something external, right? It can be triggered by something external, but it is not caused by something external. So when people say, I don't want to put myself in situations where I have to use SE a lot because I'm afraid of falling into a grip state, this is actually a false assumption. It's a false assumption because in that case, if you're in that particular kind of context, we're talking about an external cause. And an external cause cannot be the cause of your SE grip. Now, what's true is that in certain contexts where you are already dangerously close to falling into a grip state due to internal pressures, a heavily SE-oriented external context that you find yourself immersed in can trigger it faster. But the grip state would have happened anyway. That's what you need to understand. The grip state would have happened anyway, and the external event only accelerated the process. So the external event, whatever it might be, the external context, is at best a trigger, never a cause. So don't be too afraid of engaging SE in the external world, because that's basically never going to cause your grip state. And in fact, it's kind of the opposite. It's when you don't engage SE enough. It's when you steer clear of SE, when you prefer to see it as either as an enemy in your own personal narrative, or as this bothersome feature you have that better be neglected or left ignored or put away and locked inside a drawer. That is exactly when SE won't enjoy it. SE will bang the door and eventually you just smash it open, take over your consciousness, turn it upside down, such as NI sort of becomes this inferior function now that can't do much. And SE is in the driver's seat, but it's obviously archaic, infantile SE in keeping with anything that has to do with the inferior functions. And that's the grip state. And once SE is in the driver's seat, it's not always easy to know how to put an end to it, because the way you're thinking is literally being steered and governed by an SE principle, never mind how infantile in many ways. So you're in the grip of SE in a literal sense, So how to get out of something which is what has a grip on your thinking about how to get out of it, it's very difficult. It's very difficult, and often it is external events that precipitate, again, trigger the end of the grip state. Now, why is it the case that the cause of the grip state is always internal? This is something that Jung has talked about in relation to the inferior function, but it's something that psychoanalysis takes an interest in as well, outside of the whole discussion of inferior functions. There's a concept that you need to, would be very useful for you to get a handle on. And this concept, which is a psychoanalytical concept, is called the return of the repressed. Okay, the return of the repressed. So this is a very important phrase. I suggest that you keep it in mind. The idea is that your unconscious, contrary to what you might believe, is a finite entity. It does not possess unlimited capacity. And therefore, when you repress something a lot, such as SE, by refusing to engage it, anything that has to do with SE, at some point, the container that is the unconscious will start to feel pressured. And the lid will kind of start shaking a little bit, and there is even the surface of it will show some cracks, and SE will start to come out. Now, the first manifestations of that is anxiety, and anxiety, the cracks of in the sort of partition between conscious and unconscious, that causes anxiety always. So for INFJs and INTJs, because of their particular type and function style, these manifestations of anxiety will already have a bit of an SE flavor, a bit of an SE feeling tone. And usually that is felt by the anti-dominant. And usually what will happen is that the person mistakenly believes that since they can sense the color of the anxiety as SE colored, they will decide that they need to repress it further and engage in the opposite, which is more introverted activities, NI, TI related activities, and so forth. So they will retreat more, blind themselves again from this sight of SE in the illusory hope that it will go away, that the anxiety will go away. Often there is very little relief to the anxiety because SE is not going to go away. SE needs to come out. SE needs to come out, and because you've been repressing so much, it's not going to come out in a pretty fashion. It's going to cause anxiety, and if you keep pushing it down, it will eventually explode, burst the surface completely, and take over. And then you find yourself in a grip state. So you can see that the consequence, or I should say the cause of the grip state, the mechanism at work in the grip state, is the constant and consistent repression of SE urges and SE cravings. Again, we're talking about NI dominance here. Followed by the inevitable return of the repressed. Followed by yet more repression in an attempt to safeguard the psyche. Followed by a return of the repressed that eventually becomes so overwhelming that it takes over. So the lesson in all this is, yes, you do need to use SE, and there's really no real reason why you should be scared to engage it as much as possible. Because when you engage it, first of all, you're not actually shutting off NI. NI is always working. It's your world, it's your dominance, it's always working. But you're feeding it information, you're feeding it experiences, you're keeping it alive, you're keeping your personality vibrant. And you have more ability to handle SE situations than you think. What you really need to be mindful of is repressing it too much because of the return of the repressed. Let me know in the comments what you thought, guys. Thumbs up, always useful for referencing purposes. I really appreciate you for that. I happen to have written a couple of books on an anti-dominant type, namely the INFJ. So if you would like to know more about the INFJ, The Infinite Soul is my latest book, came out last year. INFJ Life in the Modern World is the title. And it looks at how INFJs can find meaning, purpose, value, and a rich life in a world that often people find hostile to INFJ life. And the key argument in the book is in many ways that authentic INFJ life with a concern for adaptation is the majestic in-between to achieve true purpose and meaning. Have a look at the reviews. The first link to the book is below. It's helped a lot of people. You can also have a look at my first book on the INFJ, The Ecstatic Soul. INFJs are infinite and ecstatic, a new look at the INFJ personality, and that's the deepest investigation of the INFJ mind that you will find online. So it really goes deep. If you're interested in going deep to understand your type or a type that you're interested in, this is the book to get. Link is below as well. And as usual, guys, don't forget that the absolute lifeblood of my channel is my Patreon page. I rely on your donations, could not do it without you, so please consider joining me on Patreon. The link is below. And you get some nice perks, in return for that. You get access to our Discord server, the Fourfold. I'm there pretty much every day, so we can interact there. Get access to bonus video content every 2 weeks where I go in depth about a topic of your choosing, as well as other perks. So hopefully see you there. Talk to you next time. Bye-bye.